When I was little, I don't remember how old I was. I think maybe not quite kindergarten. My parents decided together that my dad was going to run for office. He was running for the local city council, which was really cool in theory, and I very much liked the idea of it. But it turns out in practice, and I liked it. When he was elected the first time, I thought it was really cool. He had the office in City Hall. He was really passionate about what he did. He and my mom worked really hard to make things happen in our community. All of that was great. Elections were awful. Hated them with a fiery passion because, for one thing, I've always been a little bit socially anxious. That's my natural state of being, the super chatty thing that is a practiced trait, a grown muscle. Always been very socially anxious, and so when we were going door to door, it was my worst nightmare. There was even one time, and I think my mom's heard this, that's my mom right there. My mom's heard this story, I think, like 50 times because it's a trauma that has stuck with me my entire life. We knocked on one door, and it was a little while before we answered, and it was an older lady, and she was in her robe, and she was like, "You made me get out of my bath for this," and then she slammed the door in our face. And I don't think I knocked on another door between then and when Cindy Holscher was running for office, and I like put on my big kid pants as a 32-year-old and went and, knocked on doors. But anyway, so the thing that really I hated so much about the election was election night and the waiting and the not knowing. Because what if my parents had put their all, their everything, their heart and soul, they had laid it out there and told people, we want to do this, we want to serve you, I want to be your city commissioner, your city councilman, and then what if he hadn't won? What if he had lost? The idea of trying that hard and failing mortified me worse than any. I didn't know how. Thankfully, he won his election, but I was like, I don't know how we would possibly, I don't know what we would do. I don't know how a person goes on after that failure. And that's not an isolated feeling that I experienced in just that moment. I don't think that's an isolated feeling to just myself. I think a lot of us experience that when we look at the things around us. It's terrifying to give your whole self to something and run the risk of failing. And that's part of the reason why this scripture is a sticky one. So again, mentioning that first line right off the bat, it's like, okay, hate your father and mother, hate your children, hate even your life, and leave everything and follow me. So that is the first point where it's just baffling and flabbergasting that Jesus would ever say this kind of thing. Because we don't think of Jesus as somebody who says, hate anything. Jesus is the love guy, right? But not in this passage. And so one thing that's going on here is there's a sense of prophetic hyperbole. That would be a very common thing for someone in the Near Ancient East to use in rhetoric as saying like, hey, this thing, being a disciple, following with me, this is really stinking hard. And it's going to require a lot of sacrifice. So that's one way of saying that rather than, do we really think that Jesus at any point ever hated his own mother? Like, no, I don't think so. But so there's the prophetic hyperbole going on. And yet there's also a word in there that I think is important about how we think about self and me and my own, because it's very common for us to think like, I would do anything for my family. I would do anything for my children. I would give up, I would turn over heaven and earth and hell and everything in between for my kid. And I think there's a word for us that tells us what we live for, what we love for, can't just be about what's mine and what's my own. It can't just be my people and the things that I care about and the things that are close to me, the causes that are important to me. Being a disciple is about being for everybody else, every single other, as we say each and every week. And then Jesus goes on to talk about, if you want to do this, you got to know the cost. You gotta weigh the cost-benefit analysis here. Do you really, are you gonna set out to build a tower if you don't know if you can build a tower? Are you gonna follow me if you don't know that you can actually live up to the rigors of following me? So I kind of just sitting back from this text, I think this is a fun one that we can have conversation with. and dialogue with. We can ask some questions of the text. Maybe we can look at the text and see how Jesus, as it tells us, he's being followed by a big crowd of people. Maybe Jesus was really overwhelmed in this minute and was like, we got to get some of these people out of here. I need some introvert time. This is really hard. I mean, I guess you can come along, but you have to leave everything and hate everyone you love. So maybe that's a question we can ask of it. And also, maybe there's something else there too of can you really hang? Can you really do this? Do you really want this? And then we ask that question of ourselves. And that's a tricky thing too. If that's what it means to really be a disciple, I don't know that I fit the bill. There are certainly people who fit the bill. I think of talking about Labor Day, all of the folks like Dorothy Day, all of the labor leaders, the folks who are running the groups like Stand Up KC, who are out there fighting with everything they got all the time, leaving it all behind, giving everything to the cause. Yeah, maybe those people are the legit disciples, and I don't know what that makes me. But what do we do when we come to this text and we see the requirements laid out here, whether they're hyperbolic or not? What do we do when we come to this and either we say, well, I can't do that, I won't do that, or I don't want to do that? What's the dialogue that we have here? The conversation that we might have between ourselves and the text, between ourselves and the text, and our belief in God. What can we do with this? Because I read this text and it makes me think well, I can't do that. I'm not doing anything. I quit throwing in the towel, because if I try to do this, if I try to live my life in this way, I am just going to fail miserably. Here's the thing about failure, though. If we think about labor in our country, it has been a long string of failures. So dating back to the first Labor Day was a celebration in 1894. Hooray, we're celebrating the laborers. We're giving the first acknowledged day off to laborers in our country. We did it, you guys. We made it. We arrived. We did the right thing by the laborers. Except then, it was only a short few years later, in 1911, where we had the Triangle Shirtwaist Factory fire in New York City, where some 292 people died because of horrible working conditions. So then time goes on, and we pass what was known as the Magna Carta of labor, the laws, first laws on the books in our country regulating labor, giving workers rights in 1935. All right, now we did it. We're really there this time. Except, of course, we weren't. We know this. This is no surprise we weren't there. There was the strike of the air traffic control workers when President Reagan was just like, nah, fire them all. And then we have the struggle with wage in our own cities. Right here in Kansas City, it was just 2015 when the minimum wage in Missouri was just over $7. And it had been that way for quite some time. And it stayed that way for quite some time. That was around the time 2010, 2012, 2014, when Stand Up KC started getting their feet on the ground in Kansas City. This organization who, I'm going to be totally honest, when I first heard Stand Up KC come to town and say, $15 minimum wage for fast food workers, I was like, $15 an hour? That seems extreme, but do we hear ourselves here? 15, how can that person deserve $15 an hour when this person who's, a police officer, a firefighter is making $15 an hour? And it's not about valuing somebody else. It's about valuing everybody more. And we had to reframe our thinking around that. And Stand Up KC did this really neat sort of mock radio hour performance. I don't know if they've done it since then, but the one I remember, it was 2014, and it was down at the Westport Flea Market, and it was this great hour of fast food workers, low-wage workers, telling their stories in a style like the mock radio hour. And the first one that I remember was Fran's story, because Fran worked at Popeyes and she made chicken, but her specialty at home was chicken wings. And her family would always ask, Mom, 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 when are you gonna make chicken wings? Come on, we really want chicken wings. So one day she got off work and she thought, I'm gonna make chicken wings for my family. So she came home, she made the cherry drink that everybody loves. She made the mac and cheese. It's not just one kind of chicken wings. She had the ranch, she had the hot, she had the sweet and spicy, all of the different kinds of chicken wings, and feasted with her family. And it was a marked moment because it was the last time that happened before there was an issue in their apartment area, in their housing, and they had to emergency evacuate the area and be displaced for a while and be in some temporary housing. And during that time, because Fran was not getting paid a living wage, she was also on SNAP benefits. And during that time, one day before she went to the grocery store, she checked her SNAP benefits and it was zero. And she was supposed to have just gotten the $390 to feed her family for the month, and it was zero. And so she tried to figure out, but she went down, she was like, okay, I got an hour before I gotta be at work at 8 a.m. Can I make it downtown? Well, I have to make it downtown because I gotta feed my kids tonight. So she made it, and she got there, and she gave them her pay stub, and she gave them all the things they needed, because it turned out her mail had been going to the place that they couldn't live at right now, and nobody had thought to reroute the mail or do any of those little odds and ends. So she had to give them all the information again and get it restarted, and she went to work, and she called them when she had a break to see, like, do you have everything you need? No, turns out they didn't. They needed one more thing, so she called her partner and had her partner run another pay stub down there, and they did all the things. They dotted all the I's and crossed all of the T's, so she should have gotten those SNAP benefits, but there were too many people who needed help that day, and they couldn't get Fran's processed. So she had no money for groceries that night, and she came home, and her son said, Mom, I'm really hungry, and she had to say, I'm sorry. She fed hundreds of people in the drive-thru that day, and she had no way to feed her kid. And her kid took it like a champ, usually a joker. There weren't really any jokes that night, but she did hear her son's stomach growling across the kitchen table that evening. We have come up short in so many ways, but the story is not over. The next person who shared her story was Bridget. I've heard her speak at so many rallies. She just is this effusive spirit that you hear Bridget talk and you immediately feel like you're friends with her and you know her and you could go hang out with her in 5 minutes if you needed to. And Bridget talked about how she got involved with Stand Up KC, how she was working her job at Wendy's as a low-wage worker, and somebody came in to try to recruit folks to be involved, and she was kind of avoiding them, and they got her attention, and they said, you know what, like, you could go to your boss alone and say, I want a raise, but if you go to your boss with 100 other people and say, I want a raise, they have to listen to you. So she was convinced to go to a meeting, and she went to the meeting expecting it to be a circle of 10, 12 chairs, and it was hundreds of people. So they planned the strike day, the day when everybody would walk out on their jobs together in November. She showed up at 5:15 a.m. in the Home Depot parking lot before they were gonna march to McDonald's, and she was like, this is insane, what am I doing here? And then she saw some kids jump roping together. Somebody brought their kids with them, they were jump roping, they were having fun. And she thought, yeah, I can do it for these kids. I can do it for my kids. I can show up and be brave and give it a shot. And do you know, that didn't fix everything. In 2015, the minimum wage in Missouri was $7.65. In 2016, it was $7.65. In 2017, it was $7.70. 2018, it was $7.85. 2019, we went up $1. 2020, went up another $1. 2021, another $1. 2022, another $1. 2023, it'll be up to $12 an hour. And we're not there yet. And we have come up short. And we have failed. But nothing happens if we do not dare to try, even when failure is on the line. Bridget said that at the end of that strike, that it was the first time she believed the phrase that they chanted, I believe that we will win. The world is too much sometimes. And if we tell ourselves we have to do all things and be all things, we're gonna come up short. We're gonna fail. We're gonna see, I mean, just look at Jacksonville and the massive flooding that caused the fact that people in Jacksonville, Mississippi do not have clean water right now. It is both an environmental crisis, and it's like, look at a city, 1 in 4 people living in poverty. Look at a place where it's mostly people of color. And look at, I mean, just think about when Notre Dame burned in Paris, billions of dollars were raised in 36 hours. When this whole city is without water, but it's mostly black and brown people and people in poverty, we've barely heard about it. And think about Pakistan, where the floods have come and over 1,000 people have died, and we're not hearing about it. There is so much injustice, and there is so much to do, but it's not a failure because the work is not finished. It's not a failure, we're just not done yet. We work, we keep going, and maybe it's an optimistic way to view things, but maybe that's just what faith is. Persisting in the face of loss and failure and grief, and believing that maybe tomorrow will be the day that we find more justice for more people. What happens if we give it all? What happens if we put all of ourselves out there and offer everything that we have and it doesn't work out? Well, think about the opposite. What if we don't give all of ourselves? What if we don't try? What if we don't try to be the disciples that Jesus calls us to be? We know nothing's going to happen. We know it. I would rather live my life knowing that I've offered what I can, and even if we're not there yet, we pass the torch on. So may we have the courage to know that we are not alone in this. We are not responsible to do all of the things. It is not all on your shoulders or your shoulders or your shoulders, that together we can move forward. Together we can find something new. That together may there be moments when we can be courageous and stand up and give what we have, so that maybe one day God's sacred work will indeed be done. Amen.